What's up everybody, Eternal Fire here, bringing you a video on the Ret Paladin and the pre-patch to Legion expansion 7.0.3. Today we're going to be looking at the talent trees, the build you're going to want to use, we're going to be looking at the stat priorities, and also the single and AoE target rotations. With that said, let's look at some of the abilities in the spellbook. Avenging Wrath is an instant ability, increases all damage and healing you deal by 35% for 20 seconds. That's going to be your main damage cooldown. We're not going to be looking at the talents right now in the spellbook because we're going to look at that in the talent tree. Blessing of Freedom is an instant ability, places a blessing on a party or raid member, granting immunity to movement and impairing effects for 8 seconds. Blessing of Protection, instant ability, places a blessing on the party or raid member, protecting them from all physical damage for 10 seconds, cannot be used on a target with Forbearance, and this ability causes Forbearance for 30 seconds. So basically, if you have Forbearance up or your target has Forbearance, debuff currently active, you can't use that ability until it's off. Cleanse Toxins is an instant ability, cleanse a friendly target, removing all poison and disease effects. Crusader Strike is on a 3.09 second recharge. You have a maximum of 2 charges. It generates 1 holy power and it deals some physical damage. Basically, you have 2 charges of this ability, and you're going to want to make sure that you never have just sitting 2 charges of Crusader Strike. You're always going to want to be implementing this into your rotation. You should never have 2 charges of it up. So Divine Shield is an instant ability, protects you from all damage and spells for 8 seconds, cannot be used if you have Forbearance, just like Blessing of Protection. Divine Storm is your main AoE damage ability. It costs 3 holy power, unleashes a world of divine energy, dealing holy damage to all nearby targets. Flash of Light, a quick but expensive spell, healing a friendly target for X amount of healing. The way your buffs as a Pally have changed, so basically greater blessings maintain up to 3 of these greater blessings at one time. So if you have a 30-man raid group or a 5-man dungeon group, you can only have 3 of these blessings up on 3 unique players. So we have King's Might and Wisdom. King's puts a shield up on a target that will refresh to full strength every 6 seconds when they take damage. So that's something you're going to be wanting to put on your tanks or a party member that is going to be taking a lot of damage very shortly. Might, it's an instant ability. You put it on an ally that gives their attacks 10% chance to deal 30% additional damage as holy. So you're going to be putting this on your DPS. Ideally, at the end of the day, you're just going to want to be putting Might on 3 of the best DPS or the 3 DPS in your dungeon group, because your healer's going to have enough mana to sustain you guys. Your tank's going to have enough ability to survive without your Blessing of the Kings. Wisdom places a blessing on an ally that causes them to regenerate 1% of maximum health and mana per 15 seconds. That's pretty low. It's only 1% every 15 seconds, but still, it's going to help that healer out if they need it. So that's going to be, something. I think it's pretty cool that they're implementing classes that have buffs that buff other players for unique reasons. It kind of feels like, that spells like the old school WoW. I do like that. It brings teamwork to the table more so than just popping up, your Blessing of the Might because it buffs you, and it just so happens to buff, the other party members. Hammer of Justice stuns the target for 6 seconds on a 1-minute cooldown. Hand of Hindrance places a hand on an enemy target, reducing movement speed by 70% for 10 seconds. It's on a 30-second cooldown. So, it really reduces their movement speed by 70%. That's quite a bit, but it is on a 30-second cooldown. So you can only have it up, 10 seconds. You have 20 seconds where the target's not going to be slowed. Hand of Reckoning is a taunt. Judgment is a new, it's basically a revamped ability. Judges the target and 2 other nearby enemy, dealing holy damage and causing them to take 37% increased damage taken from your holy power spenders for 8 seconds. So basically what that means is when you have a target and you cast Judgment, for 8 seconds they're going to have a debuff that causes your holy spenders to do a lot more damage. So all of your holy spender abilities being Templar's Verdict, Execution Sentence, and Justicar's Vengeance, if you choose to take these last 2 talents, and then Divine Storm, they cost holy power, so they're considered your holy power spenders. When you cast Judgment, you have 8 seconds after that on the target where they're debuffed from those abilities, and those abilities cost do way more damage. So when you're thinking about your rotation, you're going to want to be making sure that you have holy power ready to go for when you cast Judgment, so you can put up your holy power spenders to get the most out of them that you can. We're going to go into more detail with that later. Justicar's Vengeance is a talent. Lay on Hands heals a friendly target for an amount equal to your maximum health. Cannot be used if the target has Forbearance. Rebuke is an interrupt spell. Redemption is your Resurrect. Brings a dead ally back to life with 35% maximum health and mana. Cannot be cast in combat. Shield of Vengeance is a new ability. It's an instant 2-minute cooldown. Creates a barrier of holy light that absorbs damage for 15 seconds. When the barrier is consumed, all damage absorbed is dealt as a holy damage divided across all enemies within 8 yards. So really this is just going to be a damage debuff, you know, something to keep somebody alive, you alive, whatever. And it just so happens when it is consumed, it's going to do damage as well. You're not going to be using this in your damage rotation whatsoever. It's going to be a survivability, you know, talent or ability. Templar's Verdict is your main single target AoE holy power spender. It costs 3 holy power. Powerful weapon strike that deals holy damage. Then we're going to move on to our passives. Heart of the Crusaders, a passive ability, increases your mount speed by 20%. This does not stack with other movement speed increasing effects. Then we have Mastery. Mastery, Divine Judgment. It's a passive, increases judgment damage by 75%. And causes judgment to increase damage taken from your holy power spenders by 37%. Again, when you cast judgment, you have 8 seconds where your holy power spenders, being Templar's Verdict, Execution Sentence, Divine Storm, are going to cost, you know, be 37% more damage, or based on your mastery. Then we're going to look at Retribution. When any party or raid member within 40 yards dies, you gain 20% increased damage done and 30% reduced damage taken for 20 seconds. So basically, when you start wiping, for some reason, now you're going to do a whole bunch more damage and be a little bit harder to kill. You know, so when you're on that heroic Archman boss, your whole party wipes because nobody's doing what they're supposed to. You're going to be able to solo the rest of Archimond at 11%. Sword of Light is a passive, increases damage you deal with two-handed melee weapons by 5%. So that's the spell book. Now we're going to look at the talent trees. This is the build I chose to have. You have Final Verdict in the first tier, Execution Sentence, and Consecration. Final Verdict simply increases the damage done by Templar's Verdict by 20% and the damage done by Divine Storm by 10%. It's a passive ability, easy to use. To maximize on this first tier, if you're going for a heavy AoE, you know, talent build, you're going to be, you might want to take Final Verdict or Consecration. I prefer Final Verdict. You're going to be using Divine Storm all the time. It's going to give that Divine Storm a 10% increased damage. For maximized damage in this tier, you're going to want to use Execution Sentence on single target targets. It costs 3 holy power to use this talent. A hammer slowly falls from the sky, dealing holy damage after 6.2 seconds. So basically how this is going to work is you're going to work this into your rotation with the judgment debuff on the target. So you know, you don't do any damage with Execution Sentence after you use the spell until 6.2 seconds is up, or based on your haste. So you can either cast Execution Sentence before you use Judgment and make sure Judgment goes up before Execution does damage in that, you know, time after, or you can use Judgment, which is 8 seconds, and then use Execution Sentence immediately after, and that'll still fall within the window of your Judgment debuff. I personally prefer to cast Execution Sentence before Judgment. That's just me. I feel like I can get more out of Judgment. You know, feel it out, see what you think, and let me know in the comments, you know, guys. But you can use Execution Sentence before you use Judgment and still get the, you know, the damage buff you will from, you know, Judgment. Moving down the next tier, we have the Fires of Justice, Zeal, and then Greater Judgment. Fires of Justice is a passive ability, reduces cooldown of Crusader Strike by 1 second and gives it a 15% chance to reduce the cost of your next damaging or healing holy power ability by 1. Basically, this ability, this talent chosen, is just going to make your rotation flow a little bit better. It's going to be a little bit smoother. Zeal replaces Crusader Strike, strikes the target for physical damage, maximum of 2 charges, just like Crusader Strike, generates holy power, just like Crusader Strike, but it grants Zeal, causing Zeal attacks to chain an additional nearby target per stack, maximum 3 stacks. Each jump deals 40% less damage. So basically, if you're going to be doing a, you know, raid boss fight where there's like a council boss where there's 2 or 3 targets, you know, you want to have damage up on multiple targets at once throughout the fight, this might be a talent you want to consider using. The next tier we have is your crowd control tier. We have Fist of Justice, which your damage dealing abilities that spend holy power reduce the remaining cooldown on Hammer of Justice by 8 seconds. Not something we're going to really be considering in dungeons or raids. Repentance is a 15-second cooldown, forces an enemy target to meditate, incapacitating the target and dealing up to a maximum of 25% damage, 25% of the target's health and damage over 1 minute. Usable against demons, dragonkin, giants, humanoids, and undead. And then the best talent in all situations is Blinding Light. Emits dazzling light in all directions, blinding enemies within 10 yards, dealing holy damage and causing them to wander disoriented for 6 seconds. Non-holy damage will break the disorient effect. If you just need that quick AoE stun, there you go. It's on a 1.5 minute cooldown, but you know, you're just going to get that AoE stun. You're going to disorient everybody so you can interrupt the cast, you know, just, you know, relieve your tank of that burden, you know, damage for a second. You know, that's just going to be your best ability in my opinion. Then in the next tier we have Virtue's Blade, Blade of Wrath, and Divine Hammer. Divine Hammer is going to be something you're going to want to consider if, again, you have a huge, you know, AoE heavy dungeon or raid or boss fight. You might want to consider taking Divine Hammer. Otherwise, you're going to want to take Blade of Wrath for single target. It replaces Blade of Justice, which is your built-in other than Crusader Strike. Blade of Justice is going to be your main holy power generator. So you're going to replace that with Blade of Wrath, which strikes an enemy with the Blade of Wrath, dealing holy damage and additional holy damage over 5.3 seconds, generates 2 holy power. So Crusader Strike generates 1 holy power, Blade of Wrath generates 2 holy power. In the next tier we have Justicar's Vengeance, Eye for an Eye, and Word of Glory. The one you're going to get really any damage out of is Justicar's Vengeance. It costs 5 holy power, so that's your whole holy power bar right there. A weapon strike that deals holy damage and restores health equal to the damage done. Deals 100% additional damage and healing when used against a stunned target. So that's going to be something more PvP related, you know, versus, you know, your PvE situations where you really can't stun your bosses. So this ability is going to be used hand in hand with another talent we're going to talk about in a second. So then we go down to the next tier. We have Divine Intervention and Divine Steed. Divine Intervention is an interesting ability. It's a passive. It reduces your Divine Shield cooldown by 50%. In addition, any attack which would kill you instead reduces you to 20% of your maximum health and triggers Divine Shield. So basically, you are about to die, something that would kill you, you didn't get your hand on Divine Shield enough, this is going to passively do it for you and bring you up to 20% health. Ideally, you wouldn't have to use this ability. You're going to be able to click on or use your macro for, you know, Divine Shield. But if you're doing progression and you're just really, you know, it's not a high mobility fight, you know, you're just taking a lot of damage, it's something you're going to want to consider. Otherwise, you're going to want to use Divine Steed. Summons your holy mount to ride for 3 seconds, increasing movement speed by 100%, which is a ton. Usable while indoors or in combat, so in any situation you can use this ability. It's on a 45-second cooldown. If you're doing that raid progression boss or that dungeon progression, whatever, you need that high mobility talent, there you go. You know, you're going to get 100% speed increase for 3 seconds. It's going to really help you out with those high mobility fights. Then in our last tier we're going to have Divine Purpose, Crusade, and Holy Wrath. Here in this build we're going to be using Divine Purpose because this Divine Purpose goes hand in hand with Justicar's Vengeance, and we're going to talk about that. Divine Purpose is a passive ability. Your holy power spending abilities have a 20% chance to make your next holy power spending ability free. Basically, when you use Templar's Verdict, Execution Sentence, Justicar's Vengeance if you've taken the talent, or Divine Storm, you have a 20% chance to get the Divine Purpose proc. So the reason these two go hand in hand is Justicar's Vengeance is so expensive at 5 holy power, you're only going to use Justicar's Vengeance when Divine Purpose procs. So, you know, that's going to be a huge amount of damage increase. You know, fit it into your judgment, debuff that you're going to put on your target for that 8 seconds if you can fit it in there. But that's why those two go hand in hand. You're never going to use Justicar's Vengeance unless you have a Divine Purpose proc, but it's a 20% chance, so you're going to get that up all the time. So that's your talent tree. That's the build we're going to use. You know, Blade of Wrath, Justicar's Vengeance, and Divine Purpose and Fires of Justice are really, you know, this is just the build you're going to want to have for single target AoE. Single target damage. With that said, we're going to talk about the single target rotation you're going to want to use. First and foremost, when you start the fight, before you pop your cooldowns, you're going to want to build some holy power. Otherwise, you're going to pop your cooldowns and then waste a few global cooldowns just generating holy power. So you're going to want to hit Crusader Strike, which generates 1 holy power, Blade of Wrath, which generates 2 holy power, and then Crusader Strike, which generates 1 holy power. And then you're going to want to use Templar's Verdict or Execution Sentence. I prefer to use Execution Sentence when I have enough holy power, and then Judgment, and then once Judgment is active, I use Execution Sentence. Then I use Crusader Strike to build my holy power up to use Templar's Verdict. So in 1 Judgment debuff on the target, you can get an Execution Sentence, and you can get up a Templar's Verdict, or maybe 2 if you're moving fast enough. Again, if you get a Divine Purpose proc, you're gonna want to be watching for that, because you're gonna get a free Justicar's Vengeance, and that's gonna do some huge damage for you. You never want to use Divine Purpose procs on Templar's Verdict or Execution Sentence, so you do need to pay attention to it. So you're gonna want to use Crusader Strike and Blade of Wrath to generate holy power. You're gonna want to use Templar's Verdict and Execution Sentence to, you know, spend that holy power, and then you're gonna use Justicar's Vengeance when you have a Divine Purpose proc. You're going to want to use those those holy power spenders when you have your Judgment debuff active. So, you know, basically once you've built enough holy power up, you're going to pop your Avenging Wrath and then start your Judgment and then your damage rotation at that point, you know, your big spenders. So just some things you want to think about is you always want to use your holy power generators on cooldown, being your Blade of Wrath and your Crusader Strike. You're going to want to use them on cooldown. You're going to want to be as proactive as you can with your holy power generators. You know, you're always going to want to have that up. You never want to be dry and just sitting there waiting for something to come up. But at the same time, you never just want to be sitting on 5 holy power, because if you generate holy, you're you know, continuing to use abilities that generate holy power, but you're at 5, you're just wasting damage. So that's when you're going to be using your Templar's Verdict just to spend that, so you can, you know, keep building more. So you never want to reach, you know, you never want to be sitting on 5 holy power, but you never want to, you know, not be using your holy power generators either. So you're just going to want to fit that into your rotation. It's a pretty smooth rotation, considering, you know, you're only using Justicar's Vengeance when you have a Divine Purpose proc. And then let's talk about AoE rotation real quick. It's basically going to be the same exact rotation that we just talked about for your single target rotation. However, you're going to be replacing Templar's Verdict with Divine Storm. So the same rotation for your single target, but instead of using Templar's Verdict, you're using Divine Storm to use up that 3 holy power. And that's your AoE rotation. Again, for an AoE rotation, you can, instead of Execution Sentence, you could take Final Verdict, you could take Zeal, and you could take Divine Hammer. That's up to you. You need to make that judgment call based on the encounter you're facing. Otherwise, this is the build you want to have, and instead of Templar's Verdict, you're going to be using Divine Storm. So, you know, that's the Ret Pally, guys, in a nutshell. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like. Please leave a comment and subscribe. Thank you for watching.